This story was written by Michael Marks. I'm not young. I'm not exactly old either. Probably older than most of you reading this, though. I grew up in a time before cell phones, and the internet was a pretty new thing. And we most certainly didn't have places like this to share weird or scary stories. I wish there had been something like that, though. Maybe I could have gotten some advice, or at least had a better record than a spotty memory hazed over with the alcohol and drug use of my 20s. Honestly, I had mostly forgotten about the truth of this incident. That is, until recently, it all came flooding back like a nightmarish wave. I think my brain protected me from the trauma, buried it so deep it took a long time to come to the surface. It's at the surface now, though. Now that it's back. I'm jumping ahead, though. Let's start at the beginning. The year was 1996. I was 14 years old and living in a small California town. My parents had purchased a house on the mountains. My father had become disenfranchised with life in the city and wanted to go somewhere that our closest neighbor were nearly a mile away. I can't say it made me or my sister Katie too terribly happy. We lost all our friends and ended up in this small town school that involved an hour-long bus ride to and from the campus. But she made new friends quickly. She was 2 years older than me, pretty, popular, and the kind of person people were drawn to. I, on the other hand, was short, awkward, and quiet. Suffice to say, I got picked on a lot and didn't adjust super well. My father saw it as an opportunity to toughen me up and teach me some things about how to take care of our new home. If you're just going to be sitting around the house all summer anyway, then you might as well learn some life skills. And that was that. I took one last look at my new PlayStation and my copy of Resident Evil I'd saved up my allowance for, and was put to work. I cleaned gutters, mowed the lawn, helped my dad repaint the garage, and finally, the most important task to this story, I helped him build a new woodshed. I say helped, but in reality, he talked me through it, and I did the majority of the labor. I think he always wished I was more the type to work with my hands, even though, especially at that age, I was more into drawing and writing and video games than sitting in the sun and building a shed. "We gotta get you some calluses, kiddo," he would say while slapping my back. "Builds character." I'm honestly not sure if I built any character, but I damn sure built that woodshed. Old grocery store pallets made up the flooring, but the walls and roof were these huge corrugated aluminum sheets to make sure the rain ran off and away from the wood piles. I cut myself so many damn times getting those sheets in place. It looked like I'd lost a fight with a razor blade factory. Sometimes I wonder if all the blood I spilled in that grass summoned him. Like I accidentally performed some ritual that I was totally unaware of. Spill a couple pints of blood on your own backyard lawn. Curse profusely while putting up a woodshed with your dad laughing at you the whole time. Spend every night praying to whatever deity will listen that you don't have to spend another second working on that damn shed. Summon an unholy evil that permanently scars you and leaves a broken mess, repressing memories for the majority of your life. Pretty shit ritual if you ask me. I'm joking, though. It has nothing to do with the blood, or even the shed, really. The shed is just where he first appeared. I can remember that night with more clarity than I wish to. It was the night I finished building. I remember my dad actually telling me I did a good job as he inspected my work. He brought me a Coke with dinner, said it would be a beer if I was a little older. And honestly, I appreciated the gesture. I know I make him seem like a hard ass, but the reality was that he was a good man, just very old school in his sensibilities. After dinner, I went up to my room and finally spent some time playing my game. My sister had left for the night. She was going on her first date with the boy she'd met at school. Since she was going to be out late, my parents agreed I'd earned it, and said I could stay up as late as I wanted. My hands hurt, and I was exhausted, but I honestly didn't care. I felt like I'd earned my time to relax and enjoy myself. It felt good. I stayed up way too late. The clock rolled over to 1:30, and I finally told myself I should get some sleep because who knew what chore my dad had for me the next day. After getting ready for bed, I went to my window and looked out at my handiwork, actually pretty proud of myself. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was my dad, but as my eyes adjusted to looking in the dark, I realized he was far too tall, far too lanky, and far too pale. His clothes hung off his thin frame in ragged tatters and bellowed in the night breeze. He walked around the shed, sliding his hand against the aluminum walls. The sound of his nails clicking against the bends in the metal. Then he looked up at me. There was a shine in his eyes, like the shine a raccoon has when you catch it hunting through your trash. His face was gaunt and pale. Sunken cheeks made his cheekbones look like sharp daggers jutting out the sides of his face. His mouth was a little more than a thin line of nothing drawn onto his low-set jaw. It wriggled slightly as he fixed his gaze on me.
Awake to Lilith.
It spoke. I shouldn't have been able to hear its soft whisper, yet I could very easily. It rang in my ears with a pitch similar to someone rubbing a wetted finger on a half-full crystal glass. And its stutter, a manufactured weakness like its weak-looking frame.
Come out to play, or I come in.
It cocked its head at an unnatural angle and twisted it further and further until it was looking at me almost upside down. It hummed, and the drone filled the air around me. The floor beneath my feet vibrated at the odd frequency, and it resonated through my legs and into my chest. I tried to cry out to my parents, but I felt paralyzed. I still don't know if it did something to me, or if I was just so scared I couldn't move. I watched as it twisted its body into a bizarre angle and skittered from the woodshed to the side of the house. I could hear it clambering up the wall toward my window. My feet finally broke free from their place on the ground, and I stumbled backward toward the door to my room. Dad? Mom? I remember saying the words, but I honestly can't be sure if it was a shout or a whisper, though I would realize it didn't really matter. The face suddenly appeared in my second-story window. It was close enough now that I could better make out its features. The eyes still gleamed from the sunken place in its sockets, and the lined mouth still quivered as it hummed its awful noise. Paper-thin skin was stretched tightly across its skull, and you could almost make out the blood pumping in the veins of its face. The humming stopped as its mouth stretched open into an awful void-like maw, and it clapped its jaws together quickly and sharply. over and over again. The snapping noise of its mouth opening and closing at high speed sounded like a camera shutter quickly taking pictures. I barely had time to think if I'd locked my window before the creature slid its bony fingers into the crack of the windowsill and lifted it. It slithered through like liquid, and before it touched the ground, I had flung my bedroom door open and ran into the hallway towards my parents. They were still sound asleep in their bed. I ran over to my father and started shaking him, trying to wake him up, but it was like he was in a coma. I shook and shook, but his eyes stayed closed and his body stayed still. I ran around the bed to try the same thing with my mother, screaming like a madman the whole time for them to wake up.
Sleep like little angels. Sleep like the dead.
It stood in my parents' doorway. It looked taller than before, and as if it was wreathed in shadow. Its head twisted unnaturally again, and it wrapped its fingers around the door frame, as if it was about to pounce. And that's when I heard the front door open. It was quiet. My sister trying to sneak in after curfew. But not quiet enough, though. The thing spun its head around quickly, reacting to the new presence in the house. And before I could react, it was making its way to the stairs with unnatural grace and fluidity. Its hands and feet clawed the walls, knocking pictures down. I could hear them breaking on the ground. I ran after it, not even sure what the hell I was planning to do. I watched it vanish down the stairs and heard my sister let out one of the most terrifying screams I've ever heard. Even when I'd convinced myself there was never a monster, that it had simply been a human intruder in our home that night, I never forgot the sound of that scream. From the top of the stairs, I watched as the thing encircled my sister like a constrictor, its thin fingers grabbing her throat and squeezing to cut short that awful scream into a painful wheeze. It opened its mouth again and made that camera shutter clack a few more times before it did something I still can't even begin to fathom or properly do justice with my words. It drained the life from her. I could see it happening, her eyes wide with terror as her form seemed to blur, and what I could most accurately describe as her soul was ripped from her body and into that horrid creature's open mouth. Her hair turned white, and her skin went pallid and gray until she almost looked like the thing that was killing her. I bolted down the stairs in an attempt to stop what I was seeing, but was quickly flung away as it reached an arm out and threw me backwards with little to no effort. I slammed hard against the stairway and heard my leg snap. I watched, screaming in a mix of terror and pain, as it drained every last drop of life from my sister and left her a sunken, wide-eyed shell on the floor of our entryway. I knew I was next. It stared at me with those gleaming eyes rolling in their sockets and stretched that thin line into a facsimile of a smile. And then it turned away and slithered through the half-open front door. I was left alone, legs shattered and mind broken, staring helplessly at my sister's lifeless body. It felt like I was laying there for hours, soaking in the scene around me, the pain in my leg fading to shock, and thoughts racing through my mind as to why it didn't kill me too. The screams of my parents when they finally woke up and found us seemed like they were happening in another world, like distant cries of pain being carried on the wind. My parents never really recovered from the loss. The police created a narrative that made sense to them. A prowler breaks into an isolated home. The kids, myself and my sister, startle this prowler, and he attacks us. My leg is broken, and my sister, my poor sister, is apparently scared to death. Heart failure due to an acute stress response. What kind of 16-year-old girl has heart failure from being scared? My parents bought it, though. Unfortunately, they never forgave themselves for sleeping through the encounter, despite the fact that the creature had obviously put them in a comatose state while he attacked us. My mother and father separated a few years later, and shortly after that, my father drank himself to death. My mother hasn't spoken to me in years. She fell down her own shame spiral that led to her isolating herself from us to protect herself from the pain. I, on the other hand, just forgot as much about the encounter as my mind would allow. I too decided the police's story was easier to digest than the truth. Maybe it helped. Maybe I would be a raving lunatic otherwise. I can't say remembering all of this now has helped my mental health at all. And that brings us to now, and what brought back those memories in the first place. A much shorter story, but one I'm hoping won't be my last to tell. 3 nights ago, I saw it again. I had gotten home from work and was trying to relax and watch some television before bed. I ended up falling asleep in my chair and woke up to an infomercial playing way too loud. I shut off the TV and checked my phone. It was 1:30 in the morning. In that moment, a deep chill went down my spine. That first tinge of memory came back to me like a frigid wave. I felt compelled to go to my window, almost like some unseen hand was guiding me. I know how that sounds, but it's the truth. I looked out into the courtyard of my apartment building, expecting to see the parking lot and the entranceway. Instead, I saw my parents' backyard, a sight I hadn't seen in almost 30 years. The woodshed I built, and standing next to it, a tall, gaunt man dressed in flowing rags, his eyes shining and his head cocked at an unnatural angle. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Flashes of my sister's face in frozen horror burned behind my eyes, and before I knew it, the thing was at my window, peering in at me, unblinking. The window slowly opened as I backed away. The creature slid through the crack in that serpentine way it had of moving, and stood before me, somehow even taller than I remember. Its thin line mouth dropped open, and it released my sister's horrifying scream from somewhere deep down inside, before it did its quick shuddering motion.
Sleep like the dead.
It reached for me, and I screamed. Then, it was daylight. The creature was gone, and 7 hours had passed. I spent a long time wondering if I was dead and just didn't realize it. Maybe that would be preferable. Maybe it would be better for me to be trapped in that monstrosity like my sister. At least then I wouldn't be wondering when it was coming back.